All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pump House's series of artist talks. I'm Olivia, the current gallery coordinator here at the Pump House, and today I'm joined by Betsy Midthun, whose current exhibition, Meandering Paths, is on display in our front gallery through January 6th of 2024. So thank you for joining me today, Betsy.
Nice to be here.
Yes, and let's begin with you giving us a little bit of a background of your experiences in the arts.
Well, I have always been a very big supporter of the arts, and I got a degree in art history and art education way back when. Um, and so I've dabbled in the arts most of my life, and decades ago I used to do art shows. But then as life gets busy, it's hard to do art and have kids and have a busy professional life. So I have been head of several arts councils. I've also been on a regional board and a national arts board and a state board of proponents of the arts. And when I moved to this region, I was first hired as the executive director of the Minnesota Marine Art Museum. So I did that for several years and then was on the board for almost a decade. Um, so now I've retired from my position at Winona Health, where I was a vice president of community engagement. And finally, I've been able to get back into my art and pursue something I've always wanted to really know how to do, which is to paint in pastels. So here I'm at.
Wonderful. Um, What type of art or medium did you focus in before moving into pastels?
Well, mostly watercolor and pencil and very detailed things. And so pastel is so different because it's immediate and you put it on in layers and things are so colorful. So before I was a very careful painter and more realism. And so then decades later, I still am doing a realism, but I am wanting to have the color just break out and be the focus, part of the focus of my painting. So it's a little bit different, quite a bit different, actually.
All right, great. Well, let's get into the exhibition and your process in making pastel paintings.
Great. Thank you.
So first we can see here, this is how you start to block out colors and shadows with your work. Would you mind talking a little bit about your process or viewpoint of how you view landscapes to transfer them into pastels?
Sure. Thanks, Olivia. One thing I should say, though, is that the pastels are really the purest of all mediums. They're just a pure pigment, and you use a binder, a liquid binder, and to form a paste. And then the paste is made into sticks. So people don't really understand what pastel is. A lot of people think pastel is pink and lilac and sherbet colored orange or something, but it is a very immediate medium, and it is the purest medium of all. And um, so starting a painting, what I did way back when I was painting, I wanted something immediate. I think that's the failure of many beginning artists, and it was certainly mine, is that you want representation right away. You want to get right into your painting and have it look like something within 10 minutes. And that's just not the way it really goes. So in pastel, you use a one thing that's really important in pastels is using the right kind of paper. And so you don't use a smooth paper, you really want a paper with a grit. And they come in different sizes of grit, just like when you go to the hardware store and you get different kinds of sandpaper. And they have a grit and a surface, and that's really important that you have. And you can hear here, it's not actually sand on it, but there's different levels of grit, which is really important, because if you have a smooth surface, you're going to just slide that pastel all over the place, and you won't be able to even make any layers. So in my photos that you have there showing my process, I picked, and the grits, I usually use like a 320, 280 is very coarse, and then it goes up to a 500, which would be your very finest sandpaper. Actually, I was in a class and a guy in front of me was using sandpaper because he couldn't find pastel paper, and it actually worked, but it isn't ideal. But so the layout on those photos that I've shown you just show how you really start a painting. So where you really want it to look perfect at the beginning, it doesn't. You really block in 4 values and you figure out your value shapes. And so you've got your dark value, your medium value, and then your lightest value. And you don't want to use white paper. You want to use a colored surface. And then you think of what are your shapes. It could be a whole tree mass. It could be one road. And then you want to figure out, in pastel, you go from dark to light. And so that was really hard for me too, because I wanted to put in those sparkling, bright yellows right off the bat, but that's your last thing you do. So you block it in, and then you use a hard pastel like these. These are hard pastels. Pastels come in hard, medium, and soft. And if it's hard, it has more binder and less pigment. Soft has more pigment, less binder, and they're much more expensive. But I block it in using these pastels, and then I use a wash done with alcohol, not drinking alcohol, rubbing alcohol. And you put that down, let it dry, and using the right board, then you can use a watercolor wash or you can use a alcohol wash, but you want to block it in and then let it go. Like here's one I've got that I'm blocking in, and you can see how simple it is. It's just a big block. This is the big tree. This is the darkest there is. I used a little orange for my lighter areas, and then this light lavender, and then you're going to go over it with your pastels.
Do you do a wash between every single layer or just
No,
after the first one?
no, just the first one. So first one is you get it done, and then you start building it up. And some people are really, really good at this and they know how to do it really lightly, and they can just nail painting in 3 hours. I'm pretty slow and methodical, but then you start putting in where you think your values are going to be, and the value structure of paintings is extremely important, and that's where you make it is a success or failure, is if you get your values so that they contrast and let the light colors just kind of hopefully dazzle a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to the next progress photos and the finished piece. I'll move you over here so that people can see. So this is a additional progress photo, and then the finished piece. Could you talk about
Oh, yeah,
um,
yeah,
your work between these final stages of building up
yeah, yeah.
definition?
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. This is called Meandering Paths, and actually it was done from different places. I was in the Tranquil Refuge. I was also on the Seven Bridges Walk, and then the other one was oh, it's the state park. I'm just blanked it out, but and then these. So it was sort of a combination piece, and you'll see on the left-hand side you saw the first ones that didn't look like anything, and then I start working and bringing in the layers of colors. And actually in pastel you just keep layering your color one after another. You might have a patch that's really dark red, and then you start working your colors on top of that, so that the luminosity and the richness in the scene starts coming through. And then the one on the right was my finished. And the finish then is when you have a really fun, and you get to go into these really soft pastels that have bright colors to them. And then you bring out your highlights. So does it?
Do you mainly use the soft pastels later in your process for highlighting and the harder pastels early on? Could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. That's a good question, because I didn't know how to do that before. You want to go constantly right into these luscious colors. of pastels, like, oh, let's get this bright orange on and this lovely aqua blue. But you start with these really dull kind of sticks, right? Keep working those. These work as a drawing mechanism or a medium as much as a paint brush. And by the way, you don't use you use your hands. You are constantly working with your hands with the pastel in your hand. And because of the pigment in a pastel can be kind of brutal to your hands. You don't, I use gloves all the time. So I'm constantly gloving, trying to be at least. So then you start blocking it in like you saw before with the dark pastels, I mean the hard pastels. Then you can go into some medium pastels. Like I've got a great box of medium pastels here and you can just see the values if you can see that on your screen. And then you work that through and then you come in with these really soft, bright pastels. Like, aren't they wonderful? Look at these colors. And then you start working through how to put your highlights on.
Great. Yeah, it's wonderful to see the progress photos behind these pieces because they have so much detail and the colors are so bright, especially in person. So let's go into another piece where we have some progress photos.
Yeah, doesn't that look like a mess? I mean, really. So the one on the left, I mean, this is what I really had to learn. This was really hard for me as to, that you have a mess before you come and bring it up to where you want it to be. So that was a pretty big painting and it was done on a mason and a board. They have mounted boards that you can buy when you start looking at all the things you can get. And it's a mounted board, so it's a solid surface, which is really nice. You're really not working on just a flimsy piece of paper, especially when you're building up a painting like this. So there's only three colors in the background on the first one. If you notice, it's a yellow, a yellow and an orange would be my medium, yellow my lightest, and then a purple. And by the way, I don't like purple. That's one of my least favorite colors. But in painting, it's wonderful because it brings out this richness, especially as a background. And then the next photo shows you what I have done with the wash. So that's hard pastel on the first one, just in like blocks. And then I took an alcohol wash, and you just take a paintbrush and you wash it down. You even let it drip if you want to, because that's part of the painting, and that's your underlayer. So it's pretty simple.
Yeah, wonderful. And then here we can see even more progress and then the finished piece.
Yeah. So I started this at the refuge, the Tranquil Refuge. And so I did a couple studies for this one. So I have different size studies. And then you can see the one on the left. I'm starting to develop a little bit more. I put in the clouds, so you get the value structure there. That's really important that you've got the right value of your sky moving down into the deepest. As I said, purples. I'm using a lot of purples in this and the deep blues, and I block in the trees and a few. And then I came back and added all those lily pads and details.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. And the colors, like you just keep on saying with every single piece, are just so vibrant and colorful, and they're really wonderful. Let's move
So
into,
I'm going to go back to the other one. By the
okay.
way, I take my reference materials and then put them together. So this one actually I added the lily pads from another view of the refuge, and the trees on the right was another view of the refuge. you know, and then you put it together so that you hope that the scene all works. So
And are you mostly taking reference photos when you're visiting these places, you said?
yes, or doing a value study sketch. And that was done on these value study sketches. So what I mean by that is you actually have, I have markers that are in a value study, from a very, very light marker to a almost black. And then you figure out how is that painting going to be laid out only in these markers. And then you start thinking about the color.
Great. All right, let's move into a few other finished pieces in your show. Could you talk about the importance of including locations along with your titles?
Well, thanks, Olivia, for pointing that one out. I think it's much more interesting to the viewer if those scenes mean something to them. This is the overlook at on Alaska where the big fish is. And the sunset might be a little bright, but it was a bright night. I could hardly look out at the lake on Alaska because of the reflection on the water. And I started getting kind of halos in my eyes because of this great sun. That's a great place to stand and look at the sunset. So that's where that was started. And so Lake on Alaska, and it truly was about that vivid. It was a beautiful night.
And do you tend to, this entire show that we currently have at the Pump House, are landscapes. Do you tend to work mainly in landscapes, or are there other things that you focus on in different pieces?
I tend to do I'm not just a landscape person. I actually have done my fair share of portraits, but that's harder than landscapes. Portraits are really tricky. If you're off a quarter of an inch on a tree, no one knows. But if you're off a quarter of an inch on a nose, everybody knows, right? I do like the challenge of that, and I do my fair share of still lifes also.
All right, great. Here's another wonderful, vibrant sunset piece.
Yeah, this was off the bike trail, believe it or not. Um, off the Great River uh, bike trail, and I stopped and I took a photo. And this is actually a photo. I don't. It's all marked up. So, but it was just this meandering part of the stream, and then some trees. And so I marked it up, tried to figure this one out, and you can see the fun part of this one is it didn't look like this, right? But then you go into using those really luscious pastels, and I love when it, just using those vibrant colors. So you start out with sort of just a few tones, and then this is the sunset, which wasn't quite there at the time I took the photo. So
Well, it's quite wonderful. I love how the rays of the sun uh, followed down through the center of the painting onto the river. It's just such a wonderful piece.
thank you.
All right, here is another piece of yours.
Yeah, this is called the First Glimpse of the Mississippi River, and it's on uh, Highway S. What is it called? County Road S, where you wind your way up on this beautiful little road going through the trees, and then on your way back, there's one little point where you can see the Mississippi River, just a little sliver of it. So I tried to get that sense there that you're coming down the road. You see the Mississippi River, and oftentimes the sunsets there are spectacular. But you have just a quick glimpse. Unfortunately, I could stop the car and get plenty of resource material and then go for it.
Wonderful. Here is another piece from your exhibition.
Yes, this was up on the North Shore. I bet many people have been there. This is Cascade River State Park. That's the Cascade River Bridge. You have to climb down, and then it's the Cascade River coming down and the Lake Superior coming in. So it's Lake Superior behind, and then they converge right there. And it happened to be later in the day. This was like 4:30, 5 o'clock in October, and the light just hit. It was just sensational. It just came in from the trees and came down through the river, through the rocks, and so there's my interpretation.
Wonderful. All right, so this is just another piece from Betsy's show. I highly recommend everyone come in person to see these works. The colors look vibrant on this PowerPoint, but they're even more vibrant and beautiful in person. You can come anytime during our open hours, but I also recommend coming to our artist reception, which is on December 1st, where you can meet Betsy. Betsy, is there anything else you would like to note about your exhibition or for people to keep in mind when viewing your work in person?
Oh, no, I was just very pleased to be chosen. Uh, it's quite an honor, and I haven't shown I do my work in private and then just put it on my walls around me and go, okay, let's go on to something new. So it's a really honor to be chosen, Olivia, and I am very pleased to have it up.
Well, thank you. We're very happy to have this beautiful artwork up as well. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you.